Sebastian stepped out of the Uber in front of the Grand Palace Hotel, hat on his head and leather suitcase in hand. He wore a plaid shirt, jeans and simple boots. The staff barely moved. At reception, manager Mauricio looked him up and down with disdain. "Our rooms are far too expensive for someone like you," he said arrogantly. Then came the cruel challenge. "If you can pay for our worst room, I'll give you the suite." The humiliation was public and brutal. What Mauricio didn't know was that he had just challenged the wrong man, because in a few minutes the entire truth about who this simple man really was would make the whole hotel tremble. The contrast was striking. While other guests arrived in Mercedes, BMWs and Audis, wearing Italian suits and carrying designer luggage, Sebastian walked with an old leather suitcase and a calm smile. His steps were firm and confident, those of someone who knew exactly his place in the world. At the reception desk, behind the mahogany counter, 3 uniformed receptionists attended guests with professional smiles. But when Sebastian approached, something changed in the air. The youngest receptionist, Carla, exchanged a discreet glance with her colleague. An embarrassed smile replaced her usual welcoming expression. The second employee, a blond man around 25, pretended to be busy with important papers. That's when Mauricio, the hotel manager, emerged from his office. Mauricio was 42, with gel-slicked hair, an impeccable grey suit, and arrogance that jumped out at you. He had worked in luxury hotels for 15 years and prided himself on knowing who belonged in that environment. His eyes scanned Sebastian from head to toe, like a scanner calculating value and origin. "Good afternoon," Sebastian said, politely removing his hat. "I'd like a room for 3 nights. Mauricio's smile didn't reach his eyes. It was a smile Sebastian knew well. He'd seen it in banks, expensive stores, refined restaurants, the smile of someone who had already judged and condemned. "Of course, sir." Mauricio paused deliberately. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, I came straight from the countryside. I thought I might get a room today." Other guests began to pay attention. An elegant lady murmured something to her husband. A businessman in a navy suit stopped checking his phone. The reception, previously busy with normal activities, now focused attention on this unlikely encounter. Mauricio consulted the computer with theatrically slow movements, his fingers typing unhurriedly, as if each keystroke were a hammer building a wall of humiliation. "Our rooms are somewhat specific," he said, emphasizing the word with contempt. "We only have suites available. They cost $2,800 per night." The amount was pronounced like a final sentence. Mauricio expected to see Sebastian retreat, stammering excuses, perhaps claiming he had confused hotels. Some other employees approached discreetly, curious to see how this embarrassing situation would resolve. Sebastian simply nodded, as if the value were perfectly reasonable. "That's fine. You can book for 3 nights." The bewilderment on Mauricio's face lasted only a second, quickly replaced by an even more cynical smile. He leaned slightly over the counter, assuming a territorial posture that clearly marked who was in command. "You understand we need guarantees, right? Credit card, proof of income." His voice grew louder, ensuring others heard. "Our guests are typically people of a certain standard." The phrase cut through the air like a razor. Some conversations stopped completely. An uncomfortable silence spread like waves on a lake. Then Mauricio, sensing he had an audience, decided to go further. "You know what, my friend?" He smiled with studied cruelty, savoring each word. "If you can pay for the worst room, I'll give you the suite." The impact was immediate. The lady with the expensive purse covered her mouth, shocked by the rudeness. 2 businessmen exchanged uncomfortable glances. A young couple near the elevator stopped to observe the public humiliation. Even the staff seemed embarrassed by their boss's attitude, but none dared intervene. Mauricio had crossed a dangerous line, transforming silent prejudice into explicit humiliation. He expected complicit laughter, perhaps some discreet applause from other guests. Instead, he found expressions of disapproval and a heavy atmosphere of embarrassment. Sebastian didn't lose his composure. His eyes, which had seen much in life, met Mauricio's with a calm that seemed to irritate him even more. There was no anger in that look, only a deep tranquility of someone who knew exactly his own worth. "What's the price of the worst room?" he asked simply, his voice firm without any trace of humiliation. Mauricio laughed low, an unpleasant sound that echoed through the reception. $800, he responded, certain he was ending this embarrassing charade once and for all. What Mauricio didn't know was that he was about to star in the biggest humiliation of his career. He didn't imagine that the man before him possessed more money than many of the standard guests he so fawned over. Mauricio couldn't predict that this mocking bet would become the most expensive mistake of his professional life. Sebastian placed his hand in the back pocket of his jeans, a simple gesture that would make the entire Grand Palace Hotel tremble in the next few minutes. Justice sometimes arrives dressed very simply. $800, Mauricio repeated, savoring each syllable. Cash, of course, our hotel doesn't do installments. The word installments was pronounced with such disdain it seemed to dirty the refined air of the environment. Sebastian remained motionless, hat in hand, looking directly into Mauricio's eyes. "Fine," he said simply. "I accept the bet." Mauricio blinked twice, as if he hadn't heard correctly. He expected pleas, apologies, perhaps an embarrassed retreat. Anything but this disconcerting calm. "You accept?" Mauricio's voice rose half a tone, revealing the first crack in his confidence. "I accept. If I can pay the $800 in cash, you give me the suite for free. That's what you said, wasn't it?" The reception was now in complete silence. Even the staff had stopped what they were doing to pay attention. Sebastian walked to the nearest sofa and opened his leather suitcase. The sound of the zipper echoed in the silent environment, like a drum announcing the start of a battle. Inside, organized with military precision, were documents, some simple changes of clothes, an old leather case, and a brown envelope. He removed the envelope with his usual calm and began counting what was inside, organizing small stacks on the coffee table. "My God," whispered a lady nearby to her husband, "he's counting money." The information spread through the reception like wildfire. Heads turned, conversations stopped, smartphones were discreetly pointed toward the sofa where Sebastian worked methodically. Mauricio felt the first tightness in his chest. His hands began to sweat with anxiety. Still, he maintained his haughty posture. "Money alone isn't enough," he shouted across the reception. "You need documents too, ID, tax number, proof of income." Sebastian looked up from the envelope and smiled for the first time since arriving. It was a gentle, almost paternal smile that made Mauricio feel inexplicably small. "Don't worry, young man. I have everything here." The word "young man," said with such naturalness and affection, completely disrupted the script Mauricio had planned. How could this man maintain such dignity in the face of such humiliation? Sebastian stood and walked back to the counter. In his hands, a neatly folded stack of bills and a worn leather wallet. $800, he said, placing the money on the counter as naturally as ordering coffee. "Count it out." The environment exploded in murmurs. Mauricio stared at the money as if it were a venomous snake about to attack him. His plans for public humiliation had just collapsed like a house of cards. The silence was deafening. Mauricio looked fixedly at the $50 and $100 bills organized on the counter. His hands trembled slightly when he leaned in to examine the money more closely. This is 800? He asked, his voice coming out higher than intended. "Exactly," Sebastian responded, removing his documents from the leather wallet. "ID, tax number, and here's my driver's license too, in case you need it." Mauricio took the documents with visibly sweating fingers. Sebastian Mendonça da Silva, 54 years old, native of Uberaba, Minas Gerais. Everything seemed normal, ordinary, exactly what he expected from a country bumpkin. But the money, right there in front of him, told a different story. Where did this money come from? Mauricio asked, trying to regain some control over the situation. Sebastian smiled again. It's honest money, young man, earned with the sweat of my work. What kind of work? Mauricio insisted, now clearly looking for some irregularity to disqualify the payment and save face. I'm a rancher, Sebastian responded simply. The answer provoked muffled giggles among some guests. Mauricio felt a wave of relief. A rancher, of course, probably some small rural producer who had sold a few head of cattle. A rancher, Mauricio repeated, recovering part of his arrogance. And what is a rancher doing in a hotel like this? I came for the auction, Sebastian responded calmly. What auction? The elite breeding stock auction happens tomorrow at the convention center. Mauricio frowned. And how much do you plan to spend at this auction? Depends on the animals available, Sebastian responded, but I brought enough for some good breeding stock. And how much does one of these breeding animals cost? Sebastian paused, as if calculating mentally. It varies greatly, from hundreds of thousands to values reaching millions, depending on the bloodline. The information fell like a small bomb in the reception. Several guests stopped their conversations. A female executive quickly consulted her phone, probably searching for information. Mauricio laughed out loud, a forced and uncomfortable sound. Excuse me, but you're saying a bull costs millions of reais? Elite breeding stock, yes. The best can reach impressive values. And you plan to buy several? If the prices are right, yes. Just then, an elegant couple arrived at the hotel. The man approached the counter directly but stopped abruptly upon perceiving the tension in the environment. What's happening here? The man asked. Mauricio saw an opportunity to recover some prestige. Just a small misunderstanding, Dr. Henrique. Nothing that compromises our services. Dr. Henrique looked at Sebastian, and his eyes lit up with recognition. Sebastian! Sebastian Mendonça! Sebastian turned surprised, and a genuine smile illuminated his face. Dr. Henrique, what a surprise to find you here. The two men greeted each other warmly, with hugs and pats on the back, typical of old acquaintances. Mauricio watched the scene with growing horror. How's business? Dr. Henrique asked. I heard you made some important acquisitions at the last auction in São Paulo. I managed to get some interesting breeding stock, Sebastian confirmed modestly. Mauricio felt the world collapse on his head. Here was one of the hotel's most important guests, clearly knowing and respecting the man he had spent the last 20 minutes publicly humiliating. Dr. Henrique finally turned to Mauricio, his expression changing completely. Mauricio, I hope you're treating my friend with the respect he deserves. Of course, Mauricio stammered. What details? Dr. Henrique asked, clearly suspicious. Sebastian intervened with his characteristic calm. The young man here made a bet with me. If I could pay $800 cash for the simplest room, he'd give me the suite for free. Dr. Henrique looked at Mauricio with an expression mixing incredulity and disapproval. You made a bet with Sebastian Mendonça? The way he pronounced the name, with respect, almost reverence, made Mauricio realize he had made a much bigger mistake than he imagined. Mauricio, do you know who this man is? Dr. Henrique asked. Mauricio shook his head, defeated. Let me introduce you. Dr. Henrique said, his voice loaded with solemnity. This is Sebastião Mendonça da Silva, owner of Vale do Ouro Ranch, one of the most respected cattle operations in the country. The revelation fell on Mauricio like an avalanche. You've heard of the program he developed? Dr. Henrique continued. It revolutionized bovine genetics in Brazil. Mauricio was white as paper. His legs trembled and he needed to lean on the counter to avoid falling. Then a man in a dark suit approached quickly. Mr. Sebastião, he addressed the rancher directly. I'm Marcos Oliveira from Oliveira and Associates Auctions. I need to speak with you about some lots for tomorrow. Marcos, how are you? Any problems with the event? Not exactly a problem, Marcos responded, opening his briefcase. We've received some advance offers for breeding stock we know you're interested in. The entire reception stopped breathing. What values are we talking about, Marcos? Well above market average, Marcos continued. Some lots have already received offers in the millions. Maurizio needed to sit down. His legs simply wouldn't support him anymore. I'll think about it, Sebastião said. I need to evaluate the animals personally before any decision. Of course. You're staying here, right? I can pick you up early tomorrow to go together to the exhibition center. Actually, Sebastião looked at Maurizio with a gentle smile. I'm still resolving some lodging details. Marcos followed Sebastião's gaze and immediately perceived the tension. Any problem, Mr. Sebastião? Dr. Henrique answered. The manager here made a bet with Sebastião. Marcos looked at Maurizio with absolute incredulity. A bet with Sebastião Mendonça? He let out an incredulous laugh. You know he's one of our biggest clients, right? Maurizio felt like he was in a nightmare. Actually, Marcos continued, Mr. Sebastião typically makes significant investments at our events. At the last auction in São Paulo, his acquisitions moved impressive values. Sebastião, however, remained characteristically calm. Marcos, Dr. Henrique, I appreciate the support, but let's resolve this calmly. The young man made a bet. I paid the $800. Now he'll keep his word. The suite, Maurizio murmured, his voice almost inaudible. What? Sebastião asked politely. The presidential suite, Maurizio repeated louder this time. It's at your disposal. But Sebastião wasn't finished yet. The biggest revelation was still to come. Sebastião walked calmly to where he had left his suitcase and removed a brown leather folder, clearly old but well cared for. Before accepting the suite, Sebastião said, returning to the counter, I need to clarify something. Maurizio watched him with wide eyes, like a cornered animal. You were right about one thing, Sebastião continued, opening the folder. I really should have identified myself from the beginning. He removed from the folder an official document with stamps and seals that gleamed under the lights. He extended the paper to Maurizio, who took it with trembling hands. You can read it aloud so everyone can hear, Sebastião suggested gently. Dr. Henrique approached and took the document from Mauricio's hands. Let me see this. His eyes scanned the document once, then again, then widened in total surprise. My God, Sebastião, you didn't tell me this. What is it? Marcos asked curiously. Dr. Henrique cleared his throat and positioned himself so everyone could hear him clearly. Property deed, he announced solemnly, registered at the capital's real estate registry office. The reception collectively leaned forward. Owner, Sebastião Mendonça da Silva. Property, Grand Palace Hotel building and adjacent land, located at Avenida Paulista 2847. The impact was like an explosion. Several people shouted in surprise. Maurizio literally staggered backward, needing to lean against the wall to avoid falling. He owns the hotel? A lady exclaimed, her voice high with shock. 3 years ago, Sebastião responded calmly. The previous group was having financial difficulties. It was an interesting investment. Maurizio felt like the world was spinning backward. For 20 minutes, he had humiliated, mocked, and disrespected the very owner of the hotel where he worked. 3 years, Maurizio murmured to himself. Since then, I've been following monthly reports about the hotel's operations, Sebastião explained. Customer satisfaction, service quality, team performance. Each word was a stab to Mauricio's heart. The owner had been following everything, and he had just starred in the worst customer service episode in the establishment's history. And the most interesting thing, Sebastião continued, putting the document back in the folder, is that every month I receive reports about the excellent quality of service from our general manager. Maurizio felt his blood freeze. The reports. He himself wrote those reports, filling them with praise for his own work. Very creative reports, Sebastião added with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The entire reception now observed Mauricio as if he were a rare specimen in a zoo. The humiliation was complete, total, devastating. "Mr. Sebastião," Mauricio murmured, his voice coming out as a desperate whisper. "I didn't know. Please." Sebastião observed him for a long moment, his calm eyes studying the man who had tried to humiliate him publicly. "Mauricio," Sebastião said, his voice soft but firm, "3 years ago, when I acquired this hotel, I had a vision. I wanted to create a place where all people would be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or origin." Mauricio swallowed hard, unable to find words. "You didn't just disrespect me as a customer. You revealed a character that cannot represent this hotel's values. How would you treat other guests who arrived in simple clothes? Working families? Elderly retirees who saved for a special occasion?" Each question was like a blade. "But what disappoints me most are the reports you sent monthly, full of false information about your own performance while treating customers this way." "Please, Mr. Sebastião," Mauricio finally murmured. "I have a family. I need this job." Sebastião nodded slowly. "I know you have a family, Mauricio, and that's exactly why I'm going to give you an opportunity." A murmur of surprise ran through the reception. "You'll be transferred," Sebastião announced calmly, "to our ranch in Uberaba. You'll start as an administrative assistant with salary adjusted to the new position. There you'll learn about humility, honest work, and how to treat all people with respect." The proposal was simultaneously a punishment and a chance at redemption. "If in 1 year you demonstrate you've truly changed, we can talk about your return to the hotel area, but in a position where you learn to serve, not humiliate." Mauricio nodded vigorously, tears of relief and shame running down his face. "Yes, sir, I accept. Thank you for the second chance." Sebastião turned to receptionist Carla. "Carla, you'll temporarily assume management. I observed how you tried to maintain politeness even in an uncomfortable situation. That demonstrates character." Carla was speechless, barely able to believe the unexpected promotion. "And the first decision I want you to make is a clear policy. In this hotel, all customers will be treated with the same respect, regardless of their appearance." "Yes, sir. It will be a pleasure to implement that policy." Dr. Henrique approached, clearly impressed. "Sebastião, you always surprised me. Many men in your position would simply fire the employee." "Dismissal would be the easy path," Sebastião responded, "but it doesn't teach anything. Mauricio will learn in practice that true success comes from character, not arrogance." Sebastião took his $800 back from the counter and offered them to Carla. "Use this for training on exceptional service for the entire team. I want this episode to be the last of its kind." "It will be done, sir." The reception erupted in spontaneous applause. Guests, employees, even people who had stopped on the sidewalk to observe through the glass doors, all clapped for that extraordinary demonstration of wisdom and humanity. Sebastião had transformed what could have been simple revenge into a life lesson for everyone present. True justice hadn't just been done, it had been served with wisdom, compassion, and the greatness of someone who understands that true power lies in elevating others, not in humiliating them. And so, the simple rancher from the countryside taught everyone that true wealth isn't measured by money in the bank, but by the size of one's heart and how we treat our fellow human beings. After all, character can't be bought with money, it's built with dignity. True wealth is how you treat those who don't need to impress you.